Hello and welcome to the Tail Slate Podcast, a podcast for independent filmmakers and filmmaking. I'm your host Fareed Chiron, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Toby.
Hi guys.
And on today's episode, I'm really pleased to have a really special guest. He's an independent filmmaker, writer, director, editor, Ochieng Oneko. Welcome, Ochieng.
Thank you, Fareed. I'm happy to be here. No, but thanks for having me on the show. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, man, it's really exciting to have you. We all went to the same film school, which I think you'll notice is a trend with some of our guests. So, welcome, Ochieng. So we're just going to start off by talking about some of the films that we may have seen this week, like anything interesting.
Yeah, Ochieng, what movies did you see this week?
Let me be honest with you. I haven't actually been watching films that much this last week or two.
Well, that's our show, guys. Sorry that was so short. But Ochieng wouldn't watch any movies, apparently.
I didn't know that was a prerequisite. You should have told me to be
it's
watching.
It's a film podcast. What did you think we were going to talk about?
we're gonna discuss Tango. You know.
So, guys, baking. What's that about?
All right. So speaking of baking, so I guess I'll get the ball rolling then. So, I saw a couple of things. I've been trying to keep my my film watching habits pretty consistent. So I saw this documentary that was called My Life, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, about the titular filmmaker. Mm-hmm. It's Nicholas Winding Refn, for those of you who don't know, is a Danish filmmaker who's responsible for Drive, Valhalla Rising, Bronson, the Pusher trilogy, Only God Forgives, the Neon Demon. He's made a lot, and for a lot of people around 2011 or so, I think, when Drive came out, I don't know about you guys, but I saw that and was very influenced by it. Like it left an impact for sure. I think that was the perfect film to kind of bridge one's like genre sensibilities and then like their more art house, you know, because I was in that phase. Mm-hmm. In my case, I was in that phase where I was like, you know, I want to make The Dark Knight, you know, and I think I saw Drive, and I was like, oh, you can do deep stuff too, man. Like, okay, because that movie had like that kind of getaway driver thing.
The Dark Knight is deep.
It is, but like I mean more in like, you know, that Drive won Best Director at Cannes. You know, it had a bit of a sensibility. So
yeah,
I think. And so anyway, after Drive, he made this movie Only God Forgives, which was a very divisive film that was a complete subversion from what Drive was. It also had Ryan Gosling in it, and it was just this like neon-soaked bloodbath in Bangkok that had very little dialogue and very little story. So yeah, and it was a documentary about him making that film and really struggling to maintain his sanity. To be honest, he was really struggling, and really good for, I think, anybody who you know, it's a good film to watch just to kind of see how the big league directors also have similar problems like that we might encounter. So check it out if you haven't seen it. That was my recommendation right there.
And it's called My Life?
No, it's not called My Life. It's called My Life, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, the director's name.
That's the full name. It's not that. Oh, yeah. It's called My Life and it's directed.
The
full name is Fareed. My Life directed. Okay, wow, okay.
Yeah, close enough, guy. Yeah, well, I directed Drive and Only God Forgives. That was my resume. Have you seen Only God Forgives, Ochieng?
He's also Banksy.
No, I only saw Drive. I saw Drive though.
Yeah.
Ditto.
Yeah, I love that film. Really loved it. Yeah.
I mean, Ochieng, haven't we kind of talked about this before, where kind of a director will make a breakout film and be known for this particular thing, and then when they make another film that isn't, like, we've talked about this with Todd Phillips and Joker, where like you were surprised that he made Joker, that it won the Golden Lion at Venice?
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty weird. It's pretty, I was like, I can't remember, I can't forget the first, when I woke up and I saw that, I was like, the director of The Hangover takes on the Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix. That's like out of continuity. It's pretty wild. And then it goes on and wins the gold. Like, I thought it was going to be really interesting when the news came out that he was going to be doing that movie. I thought it was going to be interesting, but I didn't think it was going to win European film festivals. It's like the craziest thing to me. I mean, it's strange, but I think it's one of those stories. It's like, it kind of makes me think of like Matthew McConaughey. You know, he started his career making all these like kind of romantic comedies, you know, like weird stuff, and then he took a few years off to kind of like feed his soul, and then he came back and he was the McConaissance, as everybody calls it. So it's like it's always interesting to see artists come and reinvent themselves. But
wait, this is the first I'm hearing about. What's the McConaissance?
It was the Lincoln Lawyer. With Lincoln Lawyer. He made this film with he did the Lincoln Lawyer, Dallas Buyers Club, Mud, and there's one other one that I'm thinking of.
Interstellar kind of capped it off, I guess. Interstellar. There was more. He made
that was a bit later. That was like a bit later into
True Detective.
But I see what you're saying.
Okay.
True Detective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
It's because Matthew McConaughey didn't used to be Matthew McConaughey. He was just that guy from rom-coms who was also in Dazed and Confused.
I knew him just as the Dazed and Confused guy. Just as the Dazed and Confused.
I knew him because my mom always used to watch rom-coms on TV. So him and Hugh Grant were kind of like together in my mind.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Same, dude. I feel you, man. Even my mom, like, it would either be Notting Hill or Failure to Launch or one of these like mid 2000 comedies.
Failure to Launch, Ghosts of Girlfriends Past.
Oh my god, that's right, bro. That was my jam in 2010, bro.
that sounds like it's. Did he kill his girlfriends in this movie? What is this?
He was a player, right? So he was like this fashion photographer who got with like all the girls and stuff. And he used to like, he's a womanizer. And then eventually, I think it was one Christmas, a girlfriend from his past like comes to him in a dream or something. And then the girlfriend that he has comes to him in a dream, and a girlfriend from the future comes to him in a dream. So it's like the Scrooge thing, you know? And they show him, like, if you don't change your ways, this is how your life is going to end up. And then he falls in love with Jennifer Garner or something.
As you do. It was a fun play on A Christmas Carol. Anyhow, I mean, look, you mentioned Todd Phillips. I had a similar reaction to that when I heard that he was doing it. Not too much, because I was aware of his early work as a documentarian, which was all about like American, like fractured American masculinity, like about frat boys, and even his other like Old School and The Hangover. I mean, they felt like.
So he went from Hangover, from documentary to Hangover to Joker.
Yeah, he's kind of jumped around a lot, and even then, like if you think of Joker just in terms of what that movie was going for, it, you know, I guess tonally it was a departure, but content-wise it was still kind of a snug fit, because the Hangover movies as well, they were examining something about like the id in the American man and sort of all that. But of course, Joker is a whole other beast.
I mean, I'm not a huge. I've seen Hangover Part 2 and I was not a fan. Like,
you gotta see the first one.
I've seen the first one.
I love it. Love the first one.
And the first one's great. And I was actually like, you know, this is actually a really interesting story. It's a comedy, but it's also kind of this mystery. And you go through. I was like, I'm having a fun time. And the second time, just Zach Galifianakis' character is more unlikable. And that's fine, but then he's rewarded for that unlikability, and I'm like, no.
It was a cash grab.
It was. I'll tell you this: Todd Phillips is a very cynical filmmaker, and I don't think he would be insulted by that. I think that's kind of how he is, and he reminds me a little bit. And I'm saying this because I just saw a film from this director, L. But he reminds me a little bit of Paul Verhoeven. Who similarly had like an interesting career span, right? We had RoboCop, Starship Troopers, which I love, and then
the original RoboCop, or the reboot?
The original RoboCop, not the reboot, man. Yeah. And then he did he did L. I don't know if you guys, which for me was his best film. Which again, there was an interesting jump in genre, in tone. But a lot of what that condemnation of society and the various facets of it, that kind of stayed throughout, and I hope he's able to do that. Like I love it when directors throw us for a loop. My hope then is that keep that going. You know, like I'm always, it makes the career more interesting. You know, which is why I've always kind of been critical of some. Like I remember, you know, it's been like a gag at this point that I rag on Wes Anderson a little bit. I don't mean to, but that's an example of someone who I feel didn't have a meaningful evolution. But you know, I think it's always great to keep fresh, I suppose.
I mean, like, Fareed, you and me both really love Adam McKay for what he did, like, in comedy.
That's a good example. That's a really good example. Yeah.
His more drama work, I meant to say. Yeah.
I still found The Big Short hilarious. That was really funny.
They're still really funny. They're still very funny, but, like, you get, like, okay, well, here he's making comedy, here he's making a drama with comedy elements.
Ooh,
and, like,
actually,
you can tell the difference.
Yeah, actually, Ochieng, anyone come to mind of, like, a director who you see maybe having a kind of, like, you hope he does something very different? Like, you know, anyone that you want to see have, sort of get out of their comfort zone, you know?
I want to see Scorsese make a Marvel movie.
That'd be incredible. I'd like to see like, cause like we always talk about Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about him is that if you look at the films that he makes and the films that he says that he loves, it's always very different stuff.
That's true.
Like I saw this really funny interview that he did where it wasn't a really funny interview, but it was really interesting. He was on stage talking about The Master. And he was he was asked like if he was to do a film course, or 3 films or something like that.
It was porn. It was porn, Ted, and Bad Day of Black Rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was,
but he really sold the shit out of Ted. He really sold the shit out of Ted. So and he was asked like, hey, why don't you want to do like one of these like big superhero movies or whatever like that? And he said like, it's not that I want to, it's just that nobody ever asked me to, It's like he'd be really interesting to see do one of these big movies. But like back to
the more and more I hear about Paul Thomas Anderson, the more and more he sounds just like an awesome sweet dude.
He's incredible. He's absolutely the greatest character in the landscape of contemporary cinema.
He is. But it's incredible to have
except for maybe Werner Herzog.
Yeah, well there you go. It's like those two are the characters.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing that we have like a filmmaker who shows up on like Sight and Sound's best of the year list, and yet talks about how he stood up or like recorded the Avengers Endgame reaction to like illustrate the power of cinema. Like he's a wonderful bridge between two worlds. And I agree, I'd love to see him he was commissioned to write Pinocchio at one point, right? For Robert Downey. And then Ron Howard came over and took over, which I feel like is now a Ron Howard thing. Like,
is that film still happening, or
I don't know, man. Dumbo happened, so I don't think anything's happening now. I think cinema's over after that film, to be honest.
I'm gonna quote you on that.
Did Dumbo make money?
I don't think so. I
mean, it must have made some money. It probably wasn't the most successful, but
yeah. But I'd be surprised if that thing did not make its money back.
It definitely made its money back.
Yeah. But then they're gonna keep going is the thing, because people wonder, like, why do people keep on making shitty movies? It's because you keep going to see them, bro.
Yeah. And then, like, there's so many reviewers out there who want to make their name on YouTube, so they watch these movies in theaters so they can make their video first and be the first reviewer to review a bad movie and get more clicks. Yeah, they're going to keep making them forever.
Yeah, I mean, bad movies make money. Okay movies make money. Good movies don't. Well, I don't want to be like a fucking cunt and say that, but like, I don't know. It's like
real cinema is movies that haven't made their money back.
Thank you, Toby. But honestly, I feel like that's more and more true. The more the time goes on, it becomes more and more true. Because big movies become bigger and small movies become smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? There's no middle movies.
Well, the whole mid-budgeted era is kind of going away. I remember, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was kind of all about that, right? The death of a certain kind of filmmaking, and I think it was his acknowledgement of Tarantino's that bracket of filmmaking, like gradually gaining less and less sort of traction, at least to be greenlit. But we're lucky we have we got IFC and A24 and Plan B, Mr. Pitt, thank you. We got all that stuff. Yeah. That's at least championing.
To some extent, Netflix.
To some extent, Netflix. Although, did you hear that?
Netflix makes everything.
They do.
With an asterisk on Netflix, because if they make your film, there's a chance that it gets lost in the catalog.
Yeah, but I mean, it gets shown to the people who are watching that kind of film. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
So I mean,
I can see that.
Yeah, it's. Did you see Spike Lee has a new film that came out today?
I'm so excited, man.
It did?
I'm so excited, and I heard it was great, so I'm so pumped to watch that. I really hope it's.
Wait, this is the first I'm hearing about it. What is it?
The Five Bloods.
Some movie about these guys
in the Vietnam War.
Black guys who were in Vietnam, yeah, and they left some gold in Vietnam and they're going back to get it. But it's it jumps across time. It's shot in different formats. Like some of it's on 16 millimeter, some of it's in 1:3:3, some of it's in 16:9. It looks really weird, but it looks kind of cool. I don't know how to feel about it though, because I'm not I haven't seen too many of Spike Lee's films, but I did not like Black Klansman. I did not
You
like...
did?
No, I did not like Black Klansman at all.
I mean, it wasn't like, wow, this is the greatest movie ever, but I had a good time with it. Oh,
I
that's
thought it was a
interesting.
poorly put together film.
Yeah, Spike Lee's hit or miss for me too. Of course, Do the Right Thing, Fight the Powers That Be. I really like that film. You see I don't know if you've seen Malcolm X, but the last that trailer for The Five Bloods, it felt like the last 10 minutes of Malcolm X, like archival footage mixed with real. You know, it was interesting. And that's another
I saw
one.
half of Malcolm X, but I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through the whole thing.
Oh no.
No,
It
was strange. It was like a little bit too preachy.
Well, that's kind of his thing, man. You know, I actually think when he tones it down just the right amount, but then brings it up at the right spots, that's when he's most successful. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I loved Malcolm X quite a bit, but I'll fully acknowledge that he's had his misses, and also that remake of Old Boy was less said the better. You don't want to go there, bro. But
Pretty infamous.
Oh, but listen.
See, the thing is,
Go on. I want to hear you first, and I'll tell you.
Wait, guys! Before you say something, no, you go ahead.
So Spike Lee.
But is someone gonna say
Toby,
something?
sit down, Toby, sit down. Spike Lee, the thing is, I was so surprised by Malcolm X because I found it like really preachy and kind of one-sided, and it kind of reminds me of Spike Lee himself, to be honest. But I was particularly surprised because Do the Right Thing, I think, was the film that came right before. I'm not. No. I think there was one film in between.
Yeah.
But still, Do the Right Thing is it's so honest.
it shows it shows so many sides, and it gives no easy answers at all.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where Malcolm X fails. You know.
I see.
There is a right and a wrong.
I mean, people now are still debating, like, did Mookie do the right thing? Like, people still ask that question, and some people are like, no, it's obvious he did the wrong thing, and some people are like, wait, now it's a bit more difficult. Like, what does this actually symbolize? But people are debating it still.
And you know, my favorite thing that Spike Lee ever said, he was at the 30th anniversary of Do the Right Thing in TIFF, and he was he said that a lot of people have asked him why Mookie threw the trash can through the window, and he said that not a single black person had ever asked him that.
I read that. I read that. That was a really incredible quote. I hope it's true. It's really interesting. I guess, like, look, that's one of the great things about Do the Right Thing, and also I think that's really gained. I mean, its relevance today is obviously it goes without saying, like, and especially in light of what's happening right now, I think more than ever it's important to kind of show movies like that and to champion them. For me, I think, going back to kind of Spike Lee's strengths and weaknesses, I just to cap, because I have something to tell you, Ochieng, which I don't know how you'll feel about it. It's regarding another filmmaker, which we talk about.
This sounds like I'm gonna feel bad about this shit. I'm gonna feel angry about this shit, aren't I?
You might. I don't know if you will. But here's the thing. I think that in the case of what's it called? Okay.
Are you gonna bring up Barry Jenkins?
He's about to say the thing.
I am gonna bring up Barry Jenkins, dude.
He says, "Here's the thing."
No. No, but Ochieng,
let's hear it.
You gave it away. I am gonna bring up Barry Jenkins, but for me, Spike Lee, I forgot what I was gonna say, but I think I was gonna say that for me, when Spike Lee is tackling a true story, or in the case of a real life figure who's so monumental like Malcolm X, I think he can't help but kind of not have as much ambiguity in how he feels about that subject, especially because this is Spike Lee, and it is obviously deeply personal and close to home. And so I think Malcolm X was an interesting example of what he does when he's given something that's so kind of important and relevant to culture and to the world. And Do the Right Thing was kind of, again, it was as well, but it was its own story. It wasn't based on, I don't think it was based on any particular thing, or real life figure. But yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, kind of, but not really. It was.
Yeah.
Of course it was. Yeah, kind of, but not really. But go on.
No, but yeah, that was it. So I don't know. I really like Black Klansman, and I hope he delivers with The Five Bloods. He's kind of hit or miss. Like, I think the last decade has been.
I hope so
the last
too.
decade's been kind of hit and miss for him. I mean, but let's see what happens.
Mostly misses though.
Mostly, yeah. Miracle on Saint Anna, which was his World War II film, I was not a big fan of. I liked how it looked, and I liked the music, but I don't think it was on par. Anyway, Barry Jenkins. So listen, I had you know how much I love Moonlight, right? I love that movie, and you know, I don't know if you've seen Medicine for Melancholy, but I love.
Yeah, I have.
I love that film. I love how conversational it is. I love the minimalist style. I love the saturated colors. You know, that movie's color is really interesting, isn't it? Like, and there's a beautiful showcase of San Francisco and all that. I have to say, man, I don't know. It didn't.
You didn't like Beale Street?
I don't know, man. It didn't really work for me. Like, all right, look, I fully admit that it's technically brilliant. The craftsmanship, of course, man. That guy, Barry Jenkins, is such a tactile filmmaker. Like, there's really a physicality to his filmmaking, right? The camera sways and moves in a very particular way. The colors are very Wong Kar-wai-esque, of course. You can see the world cinema influence. I think that it's on every level in terms of pure filmmaking, performances, even dialogue, even like the actual like storytelling, I think is pretty great. For me, I think what didn't quite work was the structure. I think what did the movie, what kind of harmed the experience was it felt a little aimless at times, and not in a way that Moonlight did, where the meandering was beneficial to that film because it was a character study.
Well, I don't think Moonlight was as I don't think Moonlight was as I don't think it drifted as much as people think it did. It had a pretty clean structure, you know.
It did have a clean structure, that's true. I think it was more sort of just like because the film, you know, as a character study, it kind of took its time, I guess. But in the case of Beale Street, just to compare it with Beale Street, because you're right, in the case of Beale Street, I felt like it had a very specific story and a chain of events that kind of established it, but it didn't quite follow it up very well, you know.
But explain what you meant to me about the structure. Explain what you meant to me about the structure.
I think the fact that, well, okay, there's two things. So first off, I feel like the film jumping back and forth between, like going to, like, you know, with the narration taking us to those flashbacks of when Fonny and what's her name?
Tish.
When Fonny and Tish met. Then coming to present day, post when he's been incarcerated. I think that there was that, and also the fact that the film also flip-flops between each of the characters. Like, you know, we spend time with the fathers, we spend time with the oh my god, I'm blanking on her name. The mother, Regina King, yes, who I love Regina King. How can I forget Regina King? So for me, I just felt like, because structurally when you're having flashbacks with Tish kind of narrating the film, and then we're also showing these other characters pop in and out and kind of set, you know, having them take the stage as well, I felt like that gave the film a feeling, for me personally, and I know that this film is beloved, so I'm kind of in the minority, I'll admit, but it gave the feeling of the film being a bit disjointed to me, and I felt like it just, by the time we got to the ending, I should have been much more wowed by what was happening, because I really, you know, was game for it, and there were many scenes in the film that felt like they were going to take me to that level, you know, of like elation about how it ended, not in terms of what happens, but like how I felt when it ended, like the experience of it. But I think just the way it was edited didn't quite do it for me. I will say this, I feel like if the film was given another cut, like another edit, I think it might have been a better film for me. Just, it was honestly, I feel like he shot a great movie, but he didn't really edit a great movie. He edited a pretty good movie, pretty good. The other thing for me, Ochieng, that kind of disappointed me was I look, James Baldwin, you know, I would never dare speak ill of James Baldwin, but I do think that the character, especially of Tish, there's not a whole lot to that character to me beyond the fact that she is an immensely likable, conserved, and very, very, empathetic person who is really a you know, incredibly, again, a very well acted character. I really liked her performance. I forgot the actress's name too, and I really liked sort of what you know, I liked her as a person, that character, but I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of evolution to that character in terms of showcasing aspects to her that perhaps weren't all on the good side, you know. I think I just wanted see a bit more sides of that character, because I feel for Fonny, I feel like we kind of got that, more or less, you know. Again, I loved both the two, and I think the movie wouldn't work if we were to really cast too much of a negative light on the principal characters, you know. What I was kind of hoping was for a broader picture. But then again, listen, I'll preface that by saying that just because I wanted more out of the film doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't succeeding at what it was doing, and I'm glad, I'm really happy that for most people it did succeed, you know. So I'd give it like a 7 out of 10, man. I think that's probably where I'm at. Again, I liked it, but I don't think it was great. What do you think? Did you love the film? Did you love the film, or were you like?
I loved it. It was one of my favorite movies, probably even of the decade. Really.
Wow.
It's for real. It's like 10 out of 10. I've seen that movie more times than I've seen Moonlight. I think it's better than Moonlight, to be honest with you. And here's the thing: is I can't exactly disagree with the things that you're saying, but I can say that I have different feelings about them.
Sure.
Than you do. Is that I feel like it's with Moonlight, it was really a little more conventional in that, you know, there was like a little bit, there was a struggle between him and his mom, there was a struggle between him and his community. You know, there was for this one, it was more of it was almost like a melodrama. It's like the characters don't really have a lot of sides, but the situation is the star, and it kind of like allows for mood to take over. I think is that he allows you, when you're with them, he allows you to fall in love. He allows you to experience love, and I think that's. I remember I was watching. I was watching. I think they were at TIFF or something, and the guy who's in the movie, who was also in Atlanta, the guy who plays Paperboy,
Yeah.
in Atlanta.
Yeah.
He was crying on stage, and he was saying, Barry, you gave us a depiction of black love, and we needed to see that. We needed to see ourselves depicted this way.
That's a really.
And
good
I feel
point.
exactly the same way, in that we needed to. It's to allow you to exist inside of these emotions. You know, it's like there's no point in the film that I ever felt like Fonny was that their love was in danger, and I mean that they were going to have problems with each other in their relationship, if you know what I mean. There's no point in the film that I felt like he was going to get out of jail either. You know, it's like there was no tension about the situation. I mean, there was tension about the situation, but there was no tension about the outcome. It was more it was very much like a novel. It was more to live inside this moment.
Very much so. Listen, I think that's that's kind of the key thing right there. Is you also mentioned that sort of the situation being the star, and I think that goes hand in hand with sort of knowing that inevitably this couple may well just stay together because you believe so firmly. And I think this was a success on Jenkins's part. Was he really captured what it was for, like, the essence of kind of falling in love with another person, and sort of, you know, I think I'm a little bit critical of how many scenes we got of them kind of falling for each other, but at the same time I acknowledge that they were pretty necessary because it really created this very strong backbone, you know, where you saw the film and you were very, like, the immersion came from the systemic injustice that the characters are experiencing, not so much, oh, is Fonny and Tish are they gonna have problems? Yeah, that was one thing. I think it's like, have you seen Happy Together from Wong Kar-wai?
Yeah, he did take a lot of from. I've seen parts of Happy Together, and he does take a lot from. I haven't seen all of Happy Together, but it doesn't look to me like he takes a lot from Happy Together.
No, not a whole lot. Yeah. He takes the song. There's a beautiful, I think it was a Spanish song that plays. You remember when Chiron's driving, the adult Chiron is driving down that street after his talk with Naomi, with his mama, and he dissolves to that beautiful shot of the kids playing by the beach, the Black Boys Look Blue thing, and he's playing that Spanish song.
Yeah.
That was taken right out of Happy Together, and I think it was a tip of the hat, like, hey man, you know, kudos, you know, the shout out, you know, so that kind of thing. And I think you really, like, when you talk about mood directors, right, like tone poem directors, I think if someone told me they loved Beale Street or Happy Together purely for the essence of that experience of, like, just, you know, kind of feeling a film more than actually kind of following a story, if that makes sense, like a structure, when it comes to just inhaling a film, like that whole Inherent Vice argument, man, you're supposed to breathe that film in, bro, you know, it's...
I was gonna say The Master, actually.
Well, that too.
Because, like, what happens in The Master?
Well, not much, but at the same time a lot, you know? So,
yeah,
that's a good example.
It's like a lot happens within the characters, but not a lot happens in the story. A guy comes back from war, and then he goes on a boat, chills with this dude for a little bit, and, you know, then joins a cult, then fucks off.
Yeah, yeah, fucks off, then comes back again, then fucks off again.
Okay.
So it's that's it.
Yeah.
But again, you just kind of character studies, you know, just analyze and observe. Anyway, yeah, Beale Street could talk. I still recommend
really
it.
Beautiful. Like the music in that film.
In which film?
Like, I mean, in Beale Street.
Ah,
like,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
The images and the music and the performance, like, you really can't escape them. I don't think you can escape them at all. Like when he's sculpting, when he's making his sculptures, when he's having a beer with his friends, what a beautiful sex scene. What a beautiful sex scene.
Yeah. Did you hear that? Did you see the PTA Barry Jenkins A24 podcast? You caught that? If not,
I saw, it was like a half-hour interview. I know what
something.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there was something like that, and he actually, I think, had planned.
They were talking about
the sex scene
go on.
and how it was meant to be in one take, and then he made the cut for reasons that were more to do with kind of. You've already I think it was this. I may be wrong, but I think Jenkins was like, first off, he was going gaga about like, man, it's gonna be in one take, bro. You know, like that whole thing, which I would be too. You know, if you could get it in one, you get it in one. And again, there was a real lyricism and a certain awkwardness, but also like a romanticism to that scene, right? It was a very artfully lit scene, but it was also very genuine. Like you believed that could be a real encounter. But the thing was, it felt firmly like the camera was. You know, in terms of looking at the actors, it gave each of them their respective looks, right? Like you got her and she was undressing. Yeah. But the thing was in the oneer, I don't think it panned to him while he was undressing, or I think he was out of focus. I think he was out of focus. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I think his editor, who I believe is a female editor, told him that it was a disingenuine thing.
Exactly.
And that to me sums up Barry Jenkins, man. He's a very caring filmmaker. Very caring.
Yeah, and part of that was that because the film is about a woman. Well, first of all, I should say that he because he's not gay or anything. He didn't want to. He didn't feel any pleasure from like pointing the camera or pointing the edit towards the man's body or whatever. It's like, objectification, whatever. It's like whatever.
Yeah.
And then his editor like told him like, what are you talking about, man? If that was a woman who was doing that over there, you would have had the camera all over her.
Yeah.
Objectify the shit out of him. So that's what they did. They had it in the cut. And what's fantastic about this sex scene is that it wasn't exploitative at all. It was completely about the characters. It was about how nervous Tish was. It was about how sure Fonny was. It was about how he had to tell her that he loved her, that you're mine and I'm yours. It was tender, and it was right there with them, and it was slow. It was sensual. It was tender. It felt just like Tish herself.
It did. Oh yeah, wow, it did. I feel like I'm talking to like a James Baldwin avatar right now, man. The way you're like really nailing the essence of it. I will say this, man. Listen, the one line in that scene, and I know we're on this for a while. We are gonna move to our next topic soon, but the thing about that film, and also Barry Jenkins generally, and again, I'm also saying this to illustrate just how much I love Barry Jenkins. He's kind of like Ari Aster or something, where in terms of nude or the softies, like whatever they're gonna do next, I'm there, And in the case of that scene, man, like when she tells him, like, I think later on it cuts to them in the metro, and she's like, "Did you know it was my first time?" And it's like, it was such an unspoken truth. We could just immediately tell from camera placement, body language, performance, it was not his first time, and it was her first time. And when he said to her, like, "Listen, it's gonna hurt, but you gotta go with me on this," like, it was like, man, like that's it's so on point, and that's very novelistic in itself. Just the amount of subtext we're getting through the written word, but also like what's not being said. So yeah, I could go on. Yeah. Again, that's the thing. It has so many individual scenes that are like on par, if not even more powerful than what he was doing in Moonlight and Medicine. All right, man. So that's that on that subject. Yes, sir. What was that?
No, I was gonna like kind of steer the conversation another way, but it's your podcast.
What do you want to talk about? No, tell me. It's okay. We can edit.
No, because we just started talking about sex scenes, and I thought it was like I saw like some. Did you see The Souvenir?
No, I love Joanna Hogg. I really want to see it, but I haven't yet. And I know there's a sequel, which is crazy, so I will see it.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. But it's like, did you see Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
Not yet, man. That's another one. I know you told me to see it, but I've been... Yeah.
I swear, it's because there are more and more female directors these days, and they're starting to tackle topics about relationships. Yeah. It's like a completely new vocabulary for how to film sex scenes is emerging, and like it's just incredible to see like a completely new. To be honest, like I checked out. It was really interesting. I heard about feminist porn and Erica Lust. Do you know who Erica Lust is?
I do not.
She's this Swedish porn filmmaker who makes porn as if it was independent cinema.
Ah. I mean, listen. I mean, does that mean it's like unsimulated sex in a narrative film, like intimacy or love or any of those, or is it like they're pornos first and foremost, but maybe have a bit more artfulness to them? Like, what do you mean by that? Like,
they are pornos.
oh, okay.
But they're pornos not based off other pornos. They're pornos based off actual sex and the experience of having sex. The camera kind of gets into the perspective of what the characters in the porn are going through. And there's like a little bit of story at the beginning, and there's a little bit of story at the end. And it's kind of like, they're actually well structured. It's really, but anyway, I just brought that up because there's for so long, you look at like sex the way it's been depicted in cinema all throughout history, and it's always been through men's eyes. And these films in like, because sex scenes are mostly just like kind of like exploitative. They're just there to be there, you know.
Yeah, then, I mean, yeah.
But then even in, if you look at like something like Blue is the Warmest Color, you know,
which
even
I thought,
though it's kind of artful.
Yeah, but I thought that went too far, and that notoriously went too far. I mean, that
exactly.
Was, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It did go too far. Even in Europe, where we were comfortable looking at sex scenes or whatever, you know, it still was a guy's perspective on sex scene. It was a guy who was indulging, you know.
Yeah, and the problem was Ochieng, is that started to, as soon as like sex scenes were put into a film that was trying to be more, I guess, meditative or contemplative about like topics relating to sexuality and romance and all that, it felt like there was a celebration of that kind of, you know, of like a male kind of gazy type of sex scene, and the celebration came just because it was raw and intimate and people are naked and explicit. It somehow bracketed itself as being kind of artful and meaningful, when in reality it was like that closeted, like, you know, still exploitive type thing. Yeah, I see.
Exactly. And Celine Sciamma, when she was talking about Portrait of a Lady on Fire, she said that because it is about a woman who's a painter painting another woman, and it talks about male gaze and it talks about female gaze. And when she talks about that film, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, she says how she says that the concept of the muse is fetishizing the idea of objectifying a woman. That the model should be a collaborator inside of the work itself, and that's what the movie does. And you know, the sex scenes that happen in Portrait of a Lady on Fire and in The Souvenir are less about a man looking at a woman's body. It's more about these people's experiences during sex, and it figures into the story. It figures into the whole vibe of it. It's not just like in Beale Street. As much as Beale Street, I wouldn't say it was male gazing, but it was still man's point of view. In Beale Street, it is an important moment in the exploration of a relationship. And it's the exact same thing in Portrait of a Lady on Fire and The Souvenir. But Portrait of a Lady on Fire and The Souvenir film it completely different, because it's a woman's hands on the camera talking about her experience. Honestly, so fascinating. Fascinating.
Dude, I'd like to, like, I gotta see these films and just talk to you about that, because that's incredible, and that's a real paradigm shift. I think, you know, the fact that, for example, you mentioned the concept of the muse, right? Well, there's something inherently, there's an inherently kind of domineering aspect towards, you know, pointing your camera to a woman with that concept of she's a muse, because, you know, it's not only a male gaze camera, but also a camera that says, you know, I'm going to put, like, that character is going to put themselves in the you know, at the top of the pyramid, basically, in that situation, more or less. And you look, sex in cinema has always been used in various ways and explored in various ways. Like, Don't Look Now has such a powerful and raw sex scene that honestly evokes grief, just as you know, if anything, it's because if Nick Rogue can do one thing, it's he can make something that's so far away from, you know, let's say, like, you know, when you think of a sex scene, you don't think of trauma and grief so much as you do with, you know, a sex scene, but he took it for something that was more to do with their suffering and this moment of respite for them to get away from it, but they can't, you know. And then Robert Altman's, have you seen The Player with Tim Robbins? Robert Altman's The Player. Man, that has like the gnarliest sex scene in movie history, man. It's in a like a.
You know what I think is the gnarliest sex scene is the fucking who's that knocking? That's
That's one for the books. Yeah. Oh man. You know, I feel like this whole thing that Scorsese's got now for like the way he treats female characters, like. I don't necessarily agree with it fully with like what he's done lately, not lately, but I see it maybe stemming from that. I think maybe that's where it started. But yeah, back to that. So I am curious to see that now there's it's almost like a taking back of what was rightfully always meant to have been done. Mm-hmm. Like now we're gonna be more. It's just more genuine, I think, and I think it's gonna put many filmmakers in check. Like, well, what's in store for how they're gonna do sex scenes from now on too. Have you seen The Spectacular Now? That's another one that just came into my head. That's another one that had a fantastic definitely. Sex scene. I mean, real. It felt like a real experience, like truly. And
definitely.
Did you see Love by Gaspar Noé?
No, I'm not that interested in Gaspar Noé. Is he doing interesting things?
Well, man, look, for me, like, I don't think he's that much of a writer, but he is an interesting visual stylist. But I was just bringing that up because I wanted your take on like unsimulated sex scenes in like narrative fiction films. Like the other side, kind of what you said of the feminist porn thing, where it's first and foremost a film that has unsimulated sex scenes. We can also count Bertolucci's The Dreamers because that's close enough.
Let's not talk about Bertolucci.
Oh yeah. I take that back. Actually, you know what? Because you just reminded me, man. After the news that has broken, we shan't go to Bertolucci. Yeah, that was disgraceful, by the way. Yeah, that was disgraceful.
Yeah.
But do you have
not fantastic.
No, it is not. Do you have a take on that though? Like unsimulated.
I mean, if the actors are down, like, why wouldn't you? Like, sure. But and if it's not exploitative, because that's the thing, is that sex scenes like. Most of the time, just there's no reason to have like a sex scene in the movies the way we conventionally think about sex scenes. Like, there's not much reason. It's unless the film is actually talking about sex, which not a lot of films do. I think
it's kind of closure for audiences to see some kind of consummation between the lovers in the film. You know what I mean? I think it's just something that they do to kind of solidify, let's say.
How many times have you seen it and you felt like it was justified or like it added more to the experience of the movie? How many times?
Very few. Honestly, very few. And I think the other problem is audiences have become pretty desensitized to just expecting that now. It's like, well, of course they're gonna be a scene where they're making out and getting together, and so it's like. But yeah, like you said,
and it looks super weird too.
Yeah,
they all come at the same time. They all movie sex is weird.
That's true.
Movie sex looks really weird.
It does.
Is Love a good movie?
I didn't think it was good. I actually thought it was a failure in terms of trying to be genuine about showing a relationship. And Monsieur Noé, if you somehow hear this at some point, know that I think you're a tremendous visual stylist. And I love, I'm very fond of your movie Irreversible, whatever. Even though it is hard to watch, but I do think, and Enter the Void is amazing. But I feel like Love, he focused so much on like showing sex as an artful thing. Like there's these beautiful like mid shots that are hovering over the actors where they're like bathed in beautiful lighting, and it's like just perfect aesthetic. It's like a painting, and he's trying to make sex feel like a Renaissance painting, like a moving Renaissance painting where there's a gracefulness and like a musicality. I get it, but the thing is, if it's not bolstered by characters that we feel we can actually not necessarily like, but at least have some relatability with or feel for their situation and circumstance, then I feel like the act of sex as shown on screen is not as genuine as it could have been. So for me, that was the issue with Love. Not so much, again, I really liked Irreversible and Enter the Void, but they're very different films. So yeah, that was my thing on Love. Yeah, but check it out, man. It's a good conversation starter. Like if we talked again, I would talk about Love if you've seen it. But what we talk about when we talk about Love. Anyway, Let's move on then, because I do want to talk about something else, and Toby and I had discussed this because, in the kind of firestorm that is the COVID-19 pandemic, and stay safe and wash your hands to our listeners, but of course it's meant a lot of movies and filmmakers not being able to shoot what they want and do what they want. So we're at this precarious place right now, and I know that you perhaps were about to to commence working on a project, on a short film, and so it's pretty fresh, the whole pre-production experience that you've maybe been having. So let's take the pandemic aside for a second, although we'll bring it back in as it relates to the situation maybe. But how do you find pre-production, and what do you think of that process when you're in prep? Because PTA famously was like, I hate it. Remember in the Magnolia documentary? Like, I hate it. So, and then you hear other directors, go like, oh, it's actually very freeing, and I feel prepared. Like, Ari Aster really preps hard, like shot list, everything. So what's your take on pre-production, and how do you go about it, man?
I really like it. I mean, I haven't, because the school doesn't give us a lot of freedom on what to do in pre-production. They kind of like give you a list of things that you
right. So this is from a film school. So from a film school
But
perspective. So let's just preface that from this particular film school perspective. It's limited.
I mean, I'm sure lots of our listeners are familiar with that situation and being like, I can't do everything I want and have to play by the school's rules.
Yeah. But it's I found it really exciting. It's great because you have so much dialogue with people from all these different departments, and because it's like you're dealing with one person that's going to deal with all your production design, one person that's going to deal with the music, one person that's going to deal with the sound. It's like you actually have to like think about like, okay, what am I going to do with the sound?
That's right. That's right.
Like it's really interesting. So where I was with pre-production, I was pretty deep into it. I was finishing. I'd done my shot list. I was finishing up my storyboard. And I was doing a thing where I drew up a storyboard, and I was going to put it into Premiere Pro and have each frame up almost like a shitty animated movie or whatever.
Were you going to speak the lines yourselves, like dub it?
Yeah, I was going to me and a classmate were going to put like our voice over it, and then we were going to start putting sounds on it because there were specific.
Preferred if it was just your voice and you had to play for both characters, but that's just me.
I'll do that one just for you, Toby.
Thank you.
You're pulling a Ridley Scott there. I believe he does the same thing. Like, he's like, I got the whole movie. I got the whole movie before I've even shot it. He says that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Ridley
a good
Scott,
technique.
Hitchcock, assholes. Yeah, but then I was gonna put, because I was having these conversations with my sound supervisor. We had like a few ideas for sounds, like connecting the sounds of the streets to the characters' emotions and all this stuff, and I was having conversations about musical references and all these things, and we're gonna do a lot of sound work off of the storyboard, and I don't know. I don't know what you want to know.
I mean, if I can pull from my own experiences, recently I just finished storyboarding the storyboard for the film I hope to shoot in October, and you learn so much through that storyboarding process. Didn't you feel the same? Like, you suddenly are timing it accordingly, and you're thinking like, okay, how long are we staying on this shot of this person? Is it that interesting of a shot to hold the audience's attention just on this? And like, I'm sure our films are going to be different because yours is a conversation between two characters. I've said this before, it kind of feels a lot like an American play, which would get adapted into a film, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, or shoot, I just forgot every other example in the book except
you forgot all the other plays.
I forgot all the other plays except Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Avengers Endgame.
No, stop it! Shut up.
That's a solid meme.
There we go.
I like
But,
that. That's my
yes.
favorite joke. That's my new favorite joke.
You're welcome,
No,
sir.
That's the joke we're known for. But while my project is much more of like it's a character in his own head, and it deals a lot with voiceover. So obviously they're going to be very different. Probably yours is going to have some shots where like the character's really expressing themselves. Meanwhile, mine is like, okay, this guy's narrating. How do we switch to different things and kind of shoot it like as if it's a nature documentary, making it exciting. And the storyboarding process really opened my eyes and forced me to figure out how it works. Did you feel the same way with that?
Well, I mean, yeah, sort of. I mean, I sort of already think about, even without storyboards, I already think of them like that. I already like design cuts
to be honest, like as far back as the script. But the storyboarding does make it a lot clearer, and then it does like help me like figure out like, oh, this shot needs to run for a little longer. This shot needs to do this and that. But what's more interesting to me, because I realized that on set, if you do it this way, if you plan everything, you know, within an inch of its life, is like you kind of you're sitting there kind of like just executing. But what would be more interesting, I think, is to just listen to what's happening, you know, to get into a room, and this is obviously not on the shoot day but before, but to just get into a room and just move the camera around and see what interesting compositions you'll find, and put the actors in the room and see what they're doing in terms of blocking before you even put a camera, and then put the camera into the room. I think that'd be more interesting to
that is such a beautiful thing, and that is so special. But I do need to address the situation and the reality. You're dealing with film students who, some of them, it's their first time being a head of department or first time working on a shoot like this. Maybe they've had some experience, but even some of the people they're working with will be. You need to have that pre-production to give way
I'm
to
saying
that
this
exploration.
would be done in pre-production. I'm not saying on the shoot day.
Sure, okay. So you're like, you go there, you have a location test with the camera, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the day before, like on your prep day, you're kind of checking it out?
A few days before, you know, because, you know, like days before, days,
Does your school let you do that?
I don't think they're going to let me do that, but I think I'm saying that's ideally what would be the most interesting, because you kind of, because I've worked with actors knowing exactly the blocking that I want specifically, you know, and it's kind of, it's, Roger Deakins is always talking about this, that he much prefers to shoot on location than in studio, because you leave room for the happy accident, you know? It's like what you have in your head, you know, you can have it's not a matter of your imagination, you know, doing you dirty or anything. It's just, there's things that can happen that you could have never dreamed of. Better or worse. That is real.
That is real. That is the experience.
And then you leave so much more room for you know, the way Orson Welles always used to talk about the director is the man who presides over accidents. You know, it's not about having a specific vision in your head, it's about presiding over the accidents. And you can tell that Orson Welles and Stanley Kubrick were directors who really, they wanted something to that they didn't plan to happen. They wanted to get as much as possible, and for you to get the most raw material, it's like this kind of like gets in the way of that. So it depends on what type of your director you are anyway. It's more, it's like I've never worked that way, but I would like to. But I do agree with you. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to add this here. I'm going to say this because I think what you're saying is very important, because we associate, for example, first off, a film where you're dealing with a Kubrick, you know, or someone like that who's known for kind of a meticulousness in their work, you know what I mean, a certain perfectionism. If you are able to kind of experiment and, you know, go before you shoot, you know, go to the locations and just forget the marks and just let the actors kind of find themselves a little bit, of course with the director's guidance, going through that process. Once you come on set, it's almost like second nature for the actors to kind of, because those loose improvisations gradually like become, you know, like rock solid foundation for what they're gonna do on the day. So when you're on the day and you're directing them, it's gonna, for the crew, it's gonna look like, wow, these guys, like, they're so on point with everything they're doing. But all of this kind of this meticulousness stemmed from a much more open environment, right? Like, it gradually became, and so that's why I think that's the key to why some like Kubrick and all are as successful as they are, is because as much as we know of them to be these, you know, sort of technical wizards who are very precise, there's also, like you said, that happy accident, that element of, I still got here from just allowing the experience to discover itself.
Exactly.
And that's something.
But it's not like they just. Mm-hmm. It's the thing that's really interesting is it's not just that they accepted happy accidents when they happened. It's that they relied on them happening. They depended on them. They accounted for it. They like. The famous scene in Clockwork Orange when they're beating the shit out of this that couple or whatever. Singing in the Rain was not in the script. That happened on set as they were filming. Yeah. You know? They depended on these things happening. Jack Nicholson in The Shining, the camera being right under him as he's like screaming at the door. You know,
He was just like,
Kubrick
let me just
fucking
try
around with
this.
a
Yeah,
viewfinder.
yeah. I saw that. I saw that. And it's,
Jack Nicholson actually famously on that day had the camera taped to his stomach. As you know, that's part of Jack Nicholson's contract. And he, just on the moment they were going to untape it, and then Stanley Kubrick said, wait, no. And then he went to the bathroom and they shot it, and then they forgot, and then they just put it in the movie.
Yeah.
But see, happy accidents right there.
You know, I'm gonna say this just to kind of bounce off.
I
what
wrote
you're
all of
saying.
the history books.
Yeah, I loved your
You tried
book.
to let me.
No, I was
Go on,
gonna,
go on.
well, I was just gonna say, guys, that I used to be quite a big storyboarder myself. Like, I think when I was making my early short films, and even sort of up to maybe 2 years ago, I used to really be like every frame. I used to love that process, and I still love that process. It's great. I've started, like, I guess since I've been doing personals, you know, since I stopped going to film school, since I finished film school, and I started doing personal projects, and I found myself having a bit more free reign, right? I kind of adopted this approach, which is in itself just an approach. I think either way is valid, and they kind of cross-pollinate a lot, but it's more or less. I would storyboard select shots or scenes that I knew required a certain intensity or rhythm that for the whole piece it was important to nail. But I'm kind of that, you know, I do shot list. I do tend to have a document there where it tells me what I need to get, and in some form I'll aim to get those angles and do those setups. But I'm also all about kind of going on the day and kind of like what you said about doing it in prep with the location scout or the location visit. I tried to apply that on the day itself a couple of times, only because I think I was afforded that luxury because I was working independently with very small crew and I knew I had time. In some instances, I don't always think I'm not an advocate for it, and I found that in my experience it was. Okay, I'll tell you the good things and the bad things. Good thing was that it allowed for a greater synchronicity between the actors and myself, because as they were kind of coming up with new ideas, even on the day, like, because, you know, as you said, happy accidents are always kind of inevitable. So even if, you know, there's a little change of plan based on how we did the setup, I can then be like, all right, well, I know I'm going to do something else with that, you know, because you're giving me an idea. So maybe I'll pan to you and combine a shot or two, you know, which is something we always do, but there was more of that going on. And that was fun and that was inventive and I think benefited, like the last short film I did, which is 27 minutes long, which, you know, is its own thing. That short film, I think it benefited from that experience. But at the same time, I'll tell you the downside of it is when inevitably you're in a rut and it's a long day and things aren't going very well and you go into it with a kind of quasi-loose mindset, I've often found that I end up not necessarily showing it's you know, just not having the camera in the right place, basically. And I think if you just are like a Robert Altman or a Cassavetes, where you gain that instinct and it's just innate, then it really works. But I am neither of those people, you know. So for me, it was like, well, what?
Really?
You don't say. Although I do share a birthday with Cassavetes, but like anyway, it was all to do with, you know. It was a great learning experience for me of like where and luckily I was able to do some reshoots and recover and get what I needed, so it's not as apparent in the final film, but it was that experience. And I think if a filmmaker can try that at some point early on, I think they should go for it just to see what that does to them, like what does it bring out innately on the day. So yeah, just as like a you know, another example of process and sort of how to go about shooting. Anyway, yeah.
Ochieng, Fareed.
Yes.
So you guys clearly like sex scenes. You've told me that. Now, I mean, you have been talking about it for like half an hour.
I just find it really interesting what's happening with sex scenes right now. It's like I wouldn't
Sure,
say that I have a
Ochieng.
poster of
Ochieng,
sex
this is a
scenes.
safe space. You don't need to lie. We get it, okay? You like to see people bone.
You've
That's fine.
caught me.
We caught you red-handed.
Yes, I came to this school to be a porn director, not a film director.
We could kind of tell from your T-shirt. It just said, "I want to be a porn director." And we're
Yeah,
like,
dude.
"Oh, okay, that's
It's
cool."
like, do you ever see Entourage?
I never
Well,
wanted
you-
to watch it.
You guys both like sex scenes, but you know what's even better than sex?
Nothing.
That rewrite of your script after the photo board / storyboard. You guys ever done that? You guys ever rewrite your script
No.
after going through that whole process?
No.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
Dude,
I've never
I know
done
what
that.
you mean.
that's the good shit. That's the good shit right there. That's where you're like, oh, it all comes together now. And you kind of already have the filmmaker's arrow playing in your head. You're like, okay, this is the way it has to go, but for this to go this way, I need to set it up this way. And it's not even going to make sense until we get here.
Yeah.
That's the good shit.
I know what you're talking about. I've never done like a... Because I don't know if this is weird, but I already have cuts in my head when I'm writing.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I have the same. It's not weird.
No, everyone does. Yeah, that's not weird at all. But then when you're like forced to photoboard it and shot list and stuff, sometimes you're like, wait, okay, this edit's going a bit longer. Like even just timing yourself while reading the script, besides fixing grammar and spelling mistakes, it helps you figure that out. And then once you have like kind of that basic idea of how you're going to edit like on paper, and then you rewrite it, and then you go into that location, and then you can kind of discover oh right, you guys can't see, but I'm doing like the hand signal from like Poncho from Emperor's New Groove. Wait, Poncho?
He's on his way to he's on his way to success, but he's gotta ace that test. He's an emperor to be, and he's totally...
That's a TV show. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I didn't know anyone else knew that. Yeah, Emperor's New School.
Dweebs.
Yeah. Well, I'm making the meme like, oh, that's good. That's good. Like, that's the real stuff right there. That's when it's like, oh, yeah, it's all coming together now.
Yeah.
Which is also from Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
There's, I totally agree with you. I've never done, like, a solid rewrite, but I've, like, added things, you know? Like, there's, you obviously, you have to add things, you have to drop things. Sometimes you're like, oh, shit, this whole page is, like, terrible.
Yeah.
It doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. It was like the audience will not like. I recently rewriting in the photo board. I was storyboarding it, and I realized there's a big chunk of dialogue where I'm like, no one gives a shit about any of this. No one cares. Like I was like, no, but that's how people talk. And it's like, because that's how people talk is not an excuse for bad dialogue.
Exactly.
People talk like that, so I don't have to try.
Dialogue has nothing to do with the way real people talk. Absolutely
exactly.
Nothing.
Sometimes they have Australian accents, and that's okay.
And we all know Australians aren't real.
You know,
of course.
You know, one thing I've noticed, guys, this has nothing to do with anything you just said, but one thing I've noticed is
it was
that
weird.
I found that actors tend to be pretty enamored by directors who like very explicitly show that they're editing the movie as they're making it. Something about it, where they feel very safe about it. Like, I've worked with a bunch of actors now who every time I'm like, hey, you know, so that shot's gonna come next, and then we're gonna cut, you know, especially that word, we're gonna cut to that shot over there, and then we tilt down, but then it's part of a sequence that's like part of a montage. And I don't know, this is just kind of lingo and stuff, but I found that it put some of my actors in a good place. Like, I was in France, right, working with actors. Like, oh yes, you see the entire movie in your head, you have made the shoot already. And I was like, yeah. Like, I think it's a good thing to do, just food for thought. This is kind of random, but it's good to kind of let them know that the film is, they see the arc, the director sees the arc. Then the actors feel comfortable to take bigger risks.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
You know what I think? I think it's exactly like... It's exactly like when you're on an airplane and the pilot says all this shit, you know, you're however many kilometers off the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that I feel like actors, and like I feel this way about sound people too sometimes, is that when it comes to what you're doing with the picture, it's not that they're curious about what you're doing, it's just they're excited to know that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it makes them know that you're like in good hands. Like, they know that, okay, this guy actually is passionate, he actually cares. I do want to say this, though. I once had a teacher, I think he was coming in for a workshop or something, but he said that, oh, well, the actor, don't tell them how you're going to edit and stuff, because the actor doesn't need to know that. And I don't agree with that at all, because it's like, okay, he doesn't need to know, but I can still say it because, like, we're part of the film.
Well, maybe,
and, like, I'm giving him an idea. I'm showing that I'm passionate and I care about something.
Yeah, I think on a broad sense that's good, but also, it depends on the actor too. Like each actor. Like I wouldn't tell that to Joaquin. I would never tell Joaquin Phoenix anything technical, even if.
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
I would never tell him anything because we're probably never gonna meet, and that would just
not with that attitude, Toby.
He scares me. He was in The Master and Joe. He's a scary man. He's a very scary dude. I don't want to invite him to my house ever. He's just...
Yeah.
But have you ever seen him on like talk shows? I love seeing Joaquin Phoenix on talk shows. It's like my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing.
Have you seen the one for Brother Bear? Where it's like the woman said like, oh man, like I love the film. Like it made me cry. And he said, I don't believe you've ever cried in your life. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And so done with the whole press junket shit. He was just like, I don't care.
Apparently
You're lying.
Time
You haven't
on a
seen
talk
the
show
movie.
and he lied about being married.
Yeah,
Apparently
about being engaged. He lied about being engaged. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Man,
Yeah.
Ellen asked him, "Why did you lie about being engaged?" I wanted people to like me. People like you when you're engaged.
That's like the only reason to ever be engaged and just never get married. People like it when I'm engaged. They think I'm going somewhere. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix is amazing. Do you see him on Letterman?
Of course, man.
I don't think I have.
You
The
have,
one where
Toby.
he's
You
like-
have, Toby.
he
You
was-
have. You
He's
have.
really high.
Yeah, Toby. I showed you I'm Still Here. They played bunches of big portions of the Letterman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, when he was doing when he was pretending to be a hip hop
Exactly.
rap artist.
Yeah. That was
The entire
something.
movie is him saying, "No, this isn't a bit. This isn't for a movie. I'm actually becoming." And then it's just for a movie. It's just for a bit.
I love Joaquin Phoenix.
He is.
I love him more than anything.
He's a beautiful man, but I'm terrified of him.
Yeah. Are you more of a? Are you more of a?
drink with him.
Ochieng, this is a dumb question because I know the answer. Are you more of a Joker guy or a You Were Never Really Here guy?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen
This
The
is a real
Joker that
question.
many times.
Okay.
I only saw it the once. But you know me and Lynn Ramsey. We got a little thing
I
going
know.
on.
I know.
Okay, guys. Fuck, marry, kill. Is it Joker? You Were Never Really Here, or The Master?
I definitely kill Joker.
Yeah, I'd kill Joker too.
I'd marry
The Master.
The
You
Master.
got and you fuck. You Were Never Really.
You would
Here.
marry The Master, really?
Of course, man.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But it's really tough because I really do like You Were Never Really Here. That's like that's really something.
Oh my goodness! I just thought of a wonderful. How has no one ever brought up the fact that I'm Still Here, and You Were Never Really Here?
They have
Or both star Joaquin Phoenix.
YouTube comments,
Okay,
man.
good.
Go on the YouTube comments. They're there.
I don't
Yeah.
read YouTube comments. You know
Yeah.
I can't read, Fareed.
Sorry, man. Okay, woof. Well, guys, look, I could go on about that. Like, I honestly, like, when it comes to sort of the best actors and like process and all that, we covered a lot of good stuff. I do want to segue to something that we talked about. Now one thing I had here on our little list was marathoning films and what you can learn from watching many films of one particular director in a specific order. We kind of covered that a little bit when we talked about PTA and we talked
Yeah.
about so that was kind of addressed. If there's anything you want to chime
And
in,
we even talked about like
Did we talk
directors when
about,
we put them in the box and stuff.
I don't remember us talking about did we talk about watching PTA films in order?
No, dude,
No,
you
we
were
didn't.
you were in the zone. You don't remember, but you were totally in it. You just you listed a bunch of films: Scorsese, PTA.
no, listen, we brushed on it. No, listen,
The
Why do you sound
Russo
like a
brothers.
rock star? Why do you sound like a rock star, bro? What's going on?
we
that
brushed
was
on
a
it.
bit. I was trying to do a bit. But I failed at doing the bit, so I'm not going to do the bit no more.
Okay, I'm really,
Yeah, go home, Toby.
okay. I'm desperately trying to move on. So we talked a little bit. Like I brought up Wes Anderson and evolution. Can you think of you know what? Okay, so when you think of a filmmaker who, as you watch the evolution of his career, I think I'm just gonna bring up one because it's really on my mind right now, and I do want to talk about Scorsese really briefly, because I feel like that's a great because he's one of those. Ochieng, I think you'll attest to this, which is.
That's the only reason you had me on the podcast, so we could talk about Scorsese, eh?
Oh man, he got me. No,
Maybe.
it's like that Heisenberg moment. It's like that Walter White. You got me. No, listen. Here's what it is. So
You're goddamn right.
here's what it is, man. If you see the directors we've loved, you know, in their twilight years, like if you look at a Hitchcock, Monsieur Ridley Scott. If you look at all these guys, I think Scorsese's. Frankly, out of what is it, the Brat Pack was it called in the 70s, the New Hollywood Brat, like De Palma, Scorsese.
Yeah, the movie brats.
Movie brats.
Yeah, there you go.
He's the
Okay, for those who don't know, could you list off the movie brats for me? I mean,
we
for
got-
those who don't know.
We got John Milius. We
Spielberg.
got Spielberg. We got Scorsese. Brian De
Coppola.
Palma.
Coppola.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think there's one more or something. I forget. There's a was Alan
Well-
was Alan J. Pakula one of them? I don't think so, but he was.
No.
Lumet.
Wait,
Lumet.
let me.
No. Lumet started in the 50s. What are you talking about?
I'm sorry. Yeah. 12 Angry Men exists. I just forgot about it.
Get it together. It was Coppola, Lucas, Scorsese.
There we go.
De Palma and Spielberg.
Right.
I'm sorry, can we go back to imagining like these young versions, Spielberg, Scorsese and stuff, and like Lumet just comes in like, hey guys, I'm a young soul too, like we're gonna hang out. I know that's not what Sidney Lumet sounds like, but like
No.
could you imagine? It's like, yeah guys, you guys wanna go see a Yankees game? You guys wanna go get a good hot dog from hot dog from like the street vendor over there.
I'm just imagining him walking in a room being like, hey, I'm Jewish.
He's got a skateboard. He's like, hey, watch this, Spielberg. He does like this flip, but he kind of nails the flip, but he's like kind of wasn't expecting it. And you see he's also surprised. He's like, whoa, I didn't expect to make that. And like Scorsese's just like clapping for him, I guess.
Toby,
We should make an animated film like that.
Man, Toby.
Well, let's get someone to animate it for us. Some guy who's making the Joker Batman Lighthouse version. Get on this.
There you go.
Toby, you really
Wait,
did
Fareed,
write
what
the
were you
history
gonna
books.
ask?
Oh, I was gonna say Toby did write the history book, so I believe everything he just said. I also think that.
I've written all the history books.
I was gonna
and
say,
I
listen.
will not correct them.
All right, I just want to add one thing, which is Robert Altman is my favorite director of all time. Just saying that, and I don't know if he's a member of that, but working in the '70s,
No, he's not. He was
around.
in the New Hollywood stuff,
Yeah,
but like
he wasn't part of the movie brats.
brats. That was really those film school guys who went
Yeah.
down to San Francisco and. But I mean, I guess De Palma and Scorsese weren't from the West Coast, but you know, it was that group of people.
It was,
Yeah.
and Scorsese is the only one that has been completely consistent with the quality of his films. The only one. I'm serious. No, listen.
He's the only one who hasn't stopped making good
that's
films.
more or less
wouldn't
what
say
I
he's
mean.
been consistent.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about Kundun, maybe, but like, or Gangs of New York, maybe. But here's the thing, Mr. Scorsese, if you watch this, I love and worship you. I think you're like the greatest ever. Here's the thing, let's look at his filmography.
Hi, Mr. Scorsese.
If you look at the '70s, right, and we moved from Who's That Knocking to Mean Streets, that was a leap, right? And then from Mean Streets all the way to Raging Bull.
There's Boxcar Bertha in between. Boxcar Bertha.
Yeah, Boxcar Bertha.
Well, are you just touching on the? You're just touching on the big ones, I see.
I am. I mean, I'm not a fan of Boxcar, but I don't think he is either. But like, the thing is, when you
know.
yeah.
I'm sorry that Fareed made you cry, Mr. Scorsese.
But look at the way his films evolved, man. I feel like part of the reason why Kundun didn't work for me, and why Last Temptation was a little flawed. I mean, Harvey Keitel's Judas, but was that he was still at a certain point. It was 80s Scorsese. He was after our Scorsese, and he was going for the big guns a little too soon.
Yeah.
And if you look at sort of what he's doing now with Irishman, say what you will about it, it is him looking back at his filmography and being like, if it wasn't clear enough before, I do not endorse gangsters. I do not believe that is a good life.
Definitely.
This is me closing the book on that. Like, look.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like him reflecting on what his legacy is. And Silence to me was it was almost him kind of going, I need to kind of cleanse myself a little bit, and
Definitely.
now really settle in. And that to me, when we talk about directors who evolve, it's one of the best
thing about
examples.
Scorsese, and I think this is a really interesting thing about him, is that, I mean, he doesn't. The thing is, people say that people like exist. I feel like on two camps where he just indulges in the gangster stuff, or he condemns it. And I think the really interesting thing is that he does both, and there's a really interesting tension between that. And sometimes he goes too far in one direction, and I think it's the indulgence. But no, Scorsese is definitely a filmmaker who has had an interesting. The thing is with most filmmakers, we don't get to see them grow old and still make good films. There's like a rare class of people who make really great films up until their 70s. I can only think of like Kurosawa, Kubrick, and
Santa.
And I think I really do defend The Irishman. I don't know. I personally I thought it's like his late career masterpiece.
I loved it.
Defend it. I mean, who doesn't like The Irishman? What?
A lot of people thought it was like him treading old ground. It was really boring, but
No,
I thought it was really wonderful.
Really?
It's the
Wow. No, I took it as like, I mean, you see Goodfellas and then you see Irishman. that is like a young man's take on gangster films, and then you see The Irishman, that is an older man. Like the way that it dissolves, it doesn't blow out. There's this blowout, but then it's the sizzle of just living with it for years. That's a story he could not have made earlier on.
Exactly.
Well, he tried and it didn't quite work out. Yeah.
Really?
For me, Silence is his best mid-career film. There's you can pick any; they're all great, but that was my one.
I think Silence is like a little bit because he does do the thing where he indulges in an argument at the beginning and then he deconstructs it as the film goes along. And I feel like the beginning part of it, where he does indulge in this kind of like hubris of monotheism, is a bit too long. But I thought ultimately the film was really wonderful.
Yeah, the payoff really kind of made it worth it. I think when he comes to kind of
definitely.
the silence of still. Yeah, go on.
Definitely. No, I was gonna move on to The Irishman. The thing about The Irishman is that because we never see directors go into the later years of their lives and still make good films. It's the first time that I can think of, and Fareed, you've probably seen more films than me, so you can tell me if there's more films that you can think of that do this. But it's the first time that I've seen an old man describe what it is to be an old man. It's really when you watch the film, you can kind of smell death. You can see a reflection on life. It isn't just his take on the gangster genre. It's him using the gangster genre as a way to talk about the fact that his friends aren't around anymore. It's incredibly beautiful.
They used to run things. Poignant. They used to run things, and now they can't even control their own bodies.
Exactly.
It's interesting. My first thought when you said if there were any others, I actually didn't think of a film. I thought of a song. I thought of what Johnny Cash did with Hurt. I don't know, that came to mind pretty quickly. Movie wise, I don't know. I think you can argue, because this is contemporary. I'm really blanking, but I think what Haneke was going for in Amor was kind of touching on that slightly.
But I mean, he wasn't. He's talking about something that's ahead of him. I don't think he's had an experience similar to
I don't think so. I don't think he's...
But it was honest.
It was honest. Yeah, and it was like him clearly acknowledging he's at that point, But it wasn't like... Yeah, he wasn't quite there yet. That's true. And also he made a movie called Happy End after that, which... but, you just... yeah. Anyhow, yeah, I totally agree, man. I'm surprised. I actually... I know some really respectable people who aren't fond of The Irishman, and I understand where they're coming from. Some of it also boils down to kind of Rodrigo Puerte's cinematography, like the washed out frame and stuff. I think some folks weren't quite as impressed with the way it was made. Interestingly enough, and I think some people were
whatever.
Yeah, man. I mean it's okay.
It's like, look at those compositions, man. And what's so interesting about it is like Scorsese. We know him because of how fast he cuts, isn't it? You think of the quick camera movements. He always says that he's always upset that he can't get a dolly movement fast enough, or that a cut didn't. It's exciting. It's this exciting way of cutting a film that came out of like French New Wave of thinking.
Yeah.
And then over here, it's so slow.
It is.
Really, it's a whole composition, and it's just so slow and so mellow, but like mellow in a melancholic way.
Yeah.
And it's you get to feel as if you get to feel an old man breathing.
Yeah, I feel like that was also Silence. Both of them had that meditative, like breathing, like you said, just kind of languorous.
But Silence was about Catholicism, and this was about age.
Yeah,
it was the pauses in these movies were very different. I think
different.
I do agree with you.
Different connotations. True, but like. Yeah, I see what you mean. But the effect was like still of the same. It was the same technical effect. What is?
Yeah.
You know what's also great is that he was able to make Wolf of Wall Street right before Silence. It's like he still got that in him too. Like he still got that high wire casino thing going on. Where he can whip pan and whiz through scenes and crane everything up and have someone talk to the lens as they're walking downstairs. Talking about how high they are. He can do that, but he can also then shift gears to The Irishman, and that's, I think, remarkable. I mean, so that was the first director that came to my head. I think Paul Thomas Anderson is on his way there, but he's much more erratic with it. I think that every two films, it's not that we're just seeing an evolution, because stylistically there's a very clear evolution with him. But we're also seeing him actually, like, it's like when Scorsese made Age of Innocence. That was kind of what Phantom Thread was to me, It was like, now I can do this too, boom, you know, and now he made a film that's in the UK, and
now I can work with Daniel Day-Lewis
again. So I mean, that's what the next film he's gonna do is like a 70s high school movie, you know, like what? So for me, it's like, it makes me really excited, you know, to see where he's gonna go, and potentially, like, if someone tells me he's one of the only directors where if it's like he's gonna make like a Ben-Hur style sword and sandals movie, I'd be like, what? But I'd still be like, yeah, but it's gonna work out, because he's kind of like, he seems to have his hand in everything, and he still makes it distinctly his own, which is crazy.
He loves movies. He really loves movies. And he hasn't dropped a single egg. He hasn't made a bad film.
Yeah. Well, I will say this Magnolia worsens every time I see it. I still love it, but it worsens every time I see it.
Yeah.
You know?
I've only seen it twice, but it was not as good the second time. But it's definitely really interesting. It's definitely a very interesting film. It has beautiful performances. I think it was his discovery, his departure from... He sort of grew into his own as a director, kind of. He developed a new and very specific identity. It's kind of like... He kind of... there's rhythm, you know? Mm-hmm. Rhythm is really important to Paul Thomas Anderson, and you can see him start to have a conversation in Magnolia about rhythm. I think he did indulge a little bit too much, but I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful experiment. It was really, and you can see the way his relationship with rhythm changes with music in Punch Drunk Love. It's I think those two films were really Punch Drunk Love a little more successful, but those were really really wonderful experiments. Exciting.
I feel that.
So exciting.
I feel that very much. Like, that's something that definitely strikes me with PTA. His films definitely always have like a very distinct rhythm throughout. Like, it always feels like, okay, now we're being guided here. Now we're being guided, and it feels natural, you know. Like, that's the rhythm.
So simple. I love how they're so simple. Like, how many? Like, I find myself paying more and more attention to how many shots a scene has, you know, and it's like he gets scenes done in such simple shots. You even hear him talking about discovering Treasure of Sierra Madre when he was filming There Will Be Blood, and it's so interesting. You can tell he borrows from these old masters, and it's like, so like I'm trying to film a scene, and I go back and watch Treasure of Sierra Madre, and I see, like, what do we need to make this film good? You know, it's like, we don't need this big crane movement and all this stuff. I need to have like a really good master, a really strong master, you know. And he does these great close-ups on long lenses, you know, and it's really simple. And and he takes, I think his experiments with rhythm have really gone farther and farther with Phantom Thread, which might as well be a musical. It's wall-to-wall music, but not just music music in terms of the camera. Like, there's entire bits of that movie that are not even scenes. They're like just sequences, just kind of like unraveling like a musical piece, you know. Paul Thomas Anderson. I love this man.
He's a good boy.
I love this man.
We've seen of late films that, you know, at the time were perhaps highly regarded or looked upon as being sort of, you know, not being inappropriate or in any way, or if they were inappropriate, it was kind of brushed upon. Whereas now, of course, in the times we're living in this ever-changing world that we live in, I was gonna sing "Live and Let Die." There's please tell me you know the "Live and Let Die" song. You guys got to know that song, right? You know, Paul. You know.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's a James Bond song from the Beatles. Anyway,
do you want to sing it to us?
No, I can't sing it. We can't upload the.
Why do I?
So anyway, point is.
He sounds too much like John Lennon.
Yeah. Well, I think it was McCartney. Anyway, point is, we need to talk about this, which is, so recently, HBO Max pulled Gone with the Wind from its film lists, you know, from its like watch list or whatever, and we're seeing more and more now certain films that carried themselves in a way that frankly was inappropriate at the time, and today more so than ever, when there's a real kind of a real sort of desire and hunger and protest for change. It just doesn't really stand anymore, you know, to have those films perhaps or at least to not at least acknowledge that there was something problematic there. So now this doesn't necessarily have to apply just to sort of societal things, such as, of course, what we're going with right now with systemic injustice involving racism and such, and police brutality, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, as much as that's incredibly important and part of why, of course, Gone with the Wind was taken off, we can also apply that, well, that didn't age well thing to like all kinds of things. There's many things that obviously haven't aged well. And so I want to get your take, Ochieng, on... I mean, look, I'll just say quickly...
Actually, Fareed, do you mind if we actually give a bit more context to the whole HBO Gone with the Wind thing?
Yeah, I was gonna...
Because because I was unfamiliar with this until yesterday when I did a bit of research and finding out about it. I actually think the situation's a bit interesting because it's not gone for... First of all, did you know Gone with the Wind, including inflation, is the highest grossing film of all time? That really says a lot. That really says a lot. But it's not gone from HBO Max for good.
It'll come back
away from now, and then they're going to bring it back, but with like a message at the beginning to explain the context. And I think that's important because you can't make a film completely disappear. But I think the harmful thing of, again, this is from someone who hasn't seen Gone with the Wind, but from what's explained to me, you know what? Just when I said that part where I haven't seen Gone with the Wind, I realized whatever next comes out of my mouth really doesn't matter. I haven't seen Gone with the Wind. But
do you think slaves like slavery?
Pardon?
Do you think slaves like slavery?
No.
I mean, I think you know enough.
Yeah, but from what I've been explained of it, it isn't just, showing slavery. It's glorifying and being like, oh, it's wonderful and happy. And then those pesky northerners came and messed all our fun. No good Abraham Lincoln or something like that. And lots of people are calling this act by HBO actually censorship. They're quoting 1984. They're like, oh, well, you can't destroy this. This is part of history. You can't. And lots of people are especially referencing that Hattie McDaniel got her Oscar as a supporting actress in this film as Mammy, correct?
Yeah, but that's not exactly a good argument, is it?
Yeah, it's not, because also I'm very certain the same people still arguing this has never actually given a shit about Hattie McDaniel before, and they're using this to help their argument. They're using plucking or whatever to be like, no, it was actually a good thing. No.
And also, it's like they patted her on the head because she was a good nigger. They patted her on the head for being a good Uncle Tom nigger.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen her Oscar speech, it was all about, I hope that this means a lot to my race and to my collaborator or something. She had to bring it in because it was obviously such an anomaly of the time. So there was something, maybe some people voted out of a sense of nobility and righteousness, but there was a lot of condescending stuff going on with that award too. And lest we forget, Oscar So White was just a few years ago. It's not like that was a precipice for some major change in the, let's say, the Academy Awards or industry recognition. Like no. Like this is it.
Yeah, and also don't forget the Green Book won the Oscar the same year that Beale Street was
over
nominated.
Over Spike Lee.
Beale Street wasn't even nominated. Now forget
over Black Panther,
Klansman,
guys.
bro.
Come on.
Beale Street wasn't even nominated. Bro.
No.
Could you imagine if people reacted the same when Green Book won the Oscar to when Gone with the Wind won the Oscar? They're like, yeah, it's just such a wonderful. It shows real inclusiveness and really we can be together, you know? I think we fixed racism, guys. What saw that the same way they treated Gone with the Wind the same way they treated
actually.
Green Book.
I agree, but listen,
funny,
I mean,
actually.
obviously that comes with the asterisks of Green Book, in spite of its kind of mishandling of its subject, still came from, I believe, noble intentions, whereas Gone with the Wind is blatantly kind of a glorification to some degree of slavery and perpetuating black stereotypes and sort of pro-Confederacy in this really weird, deranged, way for today's standards. I'm going to say this. I don't mind the decision at all, because obviously...
But I mean, no, I gotta check you on that shit, bro. Because Gone with the Wind, I mean, not Gone with the Wind, fucking Green Book is some slick shit, bro. It's some slick shit. It's like Gone with the Wind is saying Black lives don't matter, and fucking what's it called? Green Book says all lives matter. It's the equivalent of that. It's racism. It's an act of violence, but it's still slick.
I really like the way you describe that, Ochieng. I really like it.
No, I agree with that. I agree, which is why I think it's a horrible. I mean, I really hate Green Book, by the way. I think that's why I'm saying that it was a mishandling. But here's the thing, Ochieng. I think that what was his name again? The guy who made the Farley brother, right? It was Peter Farley, wasn't it? I think that, and the writer who I believe as well was. I think that they weren't even aware of that when they made the film. You know what I mean? I think that they were so blatantly. This is completely interpretation. But I'm expressing my opinion. I think that part of why that is the case with Green Book is because I don't think the filmmakers behind it, who are white, did that even occur to them that it's kind of slyly still an all lives matter type movie, perhaps. You know what I mean? I think it's just.
But I mean, so what?
Yeah, so that pretty much automatically for me is why the film just inherently was set up to fail. You know what I mean? And on top of that, man, there's more blatant stuff like that whole. I mean, it is a white savior movie too, as well. You know, like quite blatantly. You know,
exactly,
in the way that Driving Miss Daisy was.
And
you know.
And the narrative that I absolutely hate is this whole thing about we see these. I actually even saw one of these like a little while ago for production design class. Is these movies where it's like black people and white people, they're like segregated, and this white person gets together with like this black person, but it's this black person who's like really cultured. So it's like and then they kind of like develop a friendship or a relationship. It's like it's not that we hate the color of your skin. It's just that we hate your culture, your society.
If you could be more like us, it would actually really help. Just ease us into it.
Yeah, as long as you're a good nigger, it's fine.
Yeah. It's like it is.
Can I address one thing though? Mm-hmm. Can I address one thing?
Yeah.
Mahershala Ali's performance in that movie though. Mahershala Ali in Green Book is fantastic.
To be honest, I have not seen it.
What? Dude!
Why would I see it? Why would I? You want me to give these people money?
To form an opinion, I mean, okay, it's fine. But Mahershala Ali, he has this one monologue in this one delivery in The Rain, where it's just a beautiful performance where...
Yeah.
And I really related to...
You must always keep your dignity. Is it that one?
No, it was a different one. It was.
No. It was the one. It's okay. I don't want to spoil it for you, but
no, spoil it for him.
I'm not gonna watch it.
Okay.
I'm not gonna watch it.
He talks about basically like he carries himself in a certain way. It's like, so I'm too black to be white, but I'm too white to be black. Am I not black enough? Am I not white enough? Am I not a man enough? Because it's also shown in the film that he's gay. That like and. I don't know. It just really had a moment where I'm like, okay, there is a point where I don't know, as someone who's Latino but has grown up in America and has a bit of a disconnect from my culture, like, I've felt that before where I'm like, okay, I'm too white to hang out with my Hispanic friends and I'm too Hispanic to hang out with my white friends. And you feel that disconnect. So I related to that. And he also has a few things where just like the way he holds himself, I'm just in awe of him. And I might just be saying that because Mahershala Ali is one of my favorite actors.
He's really brilliant. Really brilliant.
That was he was just fantastic, and I have to say that even though Green Book, I found so many things like the beginning scene where he has the plumbers there and they drink from the cups and he just throws away the glasses. Like, why would you do that?
Sure. But
whatever.
I gotta say this. Yeah. Lenny Riefenstahl made beautiful films. That's the same way that Mahershala Ali had a beautiful performance in this film. That's what I'm gonna say.
I will agree or disagree with that once you tell me who Lenny Riefenstahl.
She made Nazi propaganda. Nazi propaganda.
It's a lady. Okay, need to check my personal biases right there. I thought it was a dude. Okay, well, yeah. Oh,
but I'm being really hard on this movie. I haven't even seen it. I'm just saying, like, from what I know about it, it's.
I mean, there is that one Spike Lee with his comment of like, I lost again. Just they switched to his driving.
Yeah, so it's actually
perfect.
Here's the thing, though, is that I think history repeats itself, but it's not. It was Do the Right Thing and Driving Miss Daisy, and then it was Beale Street and Green Book, not Black Klansman and Green Book.
I see. Well, only default because
the metaphor just works really well. Where like Spike Lee can't win against racing movies. Like if he had made a movie, he would have lost to Ford v Ferrari or something. He's like, God damn it!
Oh boy!
These goddamn automobiles.
Spike Lee's enemy is not the white man; it's cars.
Yeah, exactly. He hates Cars 2, Cars 1, and Cars 3. He hates them with a burning passion.
Spike Lee is such an angry man. I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Fareed, I want to address something because, during this whole Black Lives Matter movement, what's become the number one trending film on Netflix right now? I don't know if that's the right word, trending, but
The Help. Yes.
It's The Help. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and as some of you might know, Olivia Spencer herself said she regretted being in that movie because she was like, okay, well, this is a film about a white woman in her 30s trying to figure out how it's like to live as a black maid and stuff. Why do I never feel it's actually about how's it like to be a black maid in the 60s? Why does it feel much more about this white lady and the white savior thing?
I just want to give white people a hug so that they calm the fuck down with all this shit, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even Bryce Dallas Howard, to her credit, came out and said, nah, don't watch that.
Yeah.
Viola Davis was like, nah, don't watch that. It's so funny, man, because...
We fucked up, guys.
Okay, have you noticed how in these movies, like the racists in these movies are so cookie-cutter, mustache-twirling villain-level racist?
That's the worst part of it. Is that when you identify a racist as an individual who actively performs violence against minorities or whatever, people need to fucking like identify the racism within themselves. You can't project it onto the other. That's the worst part of it.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Like, all of us have the capacity to do that, and you might even be doing that without you knowing it.
Well, that's what I'm saying about...
You probably are.
Yeah,
that's the society we live in.
Well, that's what I'm saying about Green Book as well, in that its very existence is predicated on that notion, What do you think of Travis Bickle because that's another character that is racist. Travis Bickle is...
That's a good movie though, because it's a character study about a racist. It explores racism.
Yeah.
The thing is, you can't slash people for simply talking about racism. It's what they say about it. You know, because and maybe it would have been too far because apparently the original ending of the movie was all the pimps and all that shit. They were supposed to be black, right? So he goes into this house, he massacres all these black people. But they thought if it was on the screen, it would have been irresponsible. But on the script, it read okay. But really, it's something that you need. You need to enter that perspective because the whole thing is it's the same way we deal with alcoholism. You don't wage a war on alcoholics. You wage a war on alcoholism.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually want to address something real quick because the taxi driver thing, I didn't know that was the original ending. But now looking back, that hits so differently because then he was rewarded for slaughtering these people.
But the thing is it was a criticism of the culture, though, because you can see him...
No, but that hits different.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I could, like, I even remember, like, seeing the ending of that. I was like, really? They throw him a parade and everything, and it's, like, celebrated? I was like, okay. But now that actually feels really darkly realistic.
Yeah,
like,
but it's like,
oh shit!
It's so interesting. I find that a really incredible because I mean we have to know how racists think, and I really admire the film for showing us that, that really, like, you see all these, like, the slow motion tracking shots where you see the black people, you can really see the hate that builds inside of him. And, he's from the Midwest in America in the 70s. He's probably not had too many experiences with black people, right? And the first experience that he has with black people is in New York in the 70s, which was not, gentrification wasn't rolling through the way it is, It was a different kind, and it's like he associates this low life, this violence with black people, and they repulse him, and you can, and it's never stated explicitly, but in all these movements, like when he comes to the diner or the coffee shop, whatever it is, and all the cabbies are chilling together, and they say, yeah, this is the new black cabbie or whatever. And there's a shot, I can't remember which scene in the coffee shop it is, but you can see him, the black cabbie, pretend to, like, shoot him or whatever,
Yeah.
And you see just the way he looks at him, like the violence in his eyes, the paranoia that Scorsese gets out of the slow motion. Man, it's
Scorsese did Microaggressions before they were talked about.
Exactly. It's so. It's because the wow. I don't know. I don't have words. You really. I admire Scorsese for putting that on the screen, and he put it forth in a world where it wasn't trendy to be anti-racist or to talk about these things. You know, that's so.
It wasn't the center, but it was part of the character. It actually would have been very disingenuous not to address it.
Yeah. Well, and more importantly, because it was ultimately a condemnation in a time when that wasn't really looked at as something that was that prevalent in the movie screens, in the multiplexes, and here he was, the trailblazer that he was. I'm sorry, it was quite remarkable. Yeah, man.
I don't know how much. I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it a condemnation exactly, because I feel like the film is a little bit sympathetic to Travis Bickle. I like this. I don't know if it was Scorsese himself who said this, or I read this in criticism about Scorsese, but they said Scorsese's characters are often people who are created by their own societies and then rejected by them. Travis Bickle is not an other who is evil. He is the most evil part of our society, kind of incarnated. That's what I think.
Well, to quote Joker, or Robert De Niro in Joker, there's many people who live in society. There's many people who go through. They don't go around just shooting up, shooting political candidates. That not everyone does that. There's a point where I understand, yes, the situation's bad and we need help, but also, ultimately, you are responsible for your decisions.
Well, I think what he was showing
actions.
Yeah, well, see what you're saying, Toby, and to Ochieng, I'll say what I think Scorsese was going for in that was to show that at the root of every evil, at the root of, let's say, Travis Bickle, who perhaps was the ultimate incarnation of the worst of society, there was some semblance of humanity where it came from. The seed that eventually grew into that evil was still a seed that maintained some semblance of wanting to, of coming from a place that wasn't evil at first, basically, and therein was the human. And I think that whatever sympathy, and I think this is kind of a Schrader thing, to be honest, because I have noticed that with him too, is that he will often, it'll really three-dimensionalize the character, but he would paint these broad brushstrokes of one particular character by saying, there are things about this character that aren't inherently you can't really sympathize with so much, but they're gonna create this aura of there is some humanity there. But then I think in Taxi Driver's case, it was to then be by the time he tipped over across the edge, it's meant to kind of shock the audience into be oh my god, this is who he is. That's what he's and then you're I can't get behind this. It's what Joker tried to do in a more kind of edgy high school kind of way. It's
I mean, there's a part where with Taxi Driver, I never sympathized, but I understood. Yeah. And I think that's what lots of people misunderstand, because he's not sympathizing, not saying, oh, those poor things. He's making you understand how this could happen. I mean, the same thing we talked about, Do the Right Thing, Fareed. Even if you don't agree with Mookie throwing in the trash can, you understand why. You understand the situation. The world is built up so carefully. The characters are so fleshed out. You understand why everyone does everything in that film. And the same thing with Taxi Driver. You understand the mentality. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to sympathize, but you understand. And that's what I think people are scared of. And that's why they say, oh, well, he's making us sympathize. No, he's making you understand. And that scares you, because if you understand, that means it could happen to you, and you could be doing it, and you don't want to acknowledge that. Oftentimes, we say this a lot with films, oh, well, that didn't age well. Someone does something in films, but I don't really feel it's often, well, that didn't age well. Is it actually it didn't age well, or was it that you didn't care about the consequences or who it was hurting before, and now it's different? Don't get me wrong. You could have been ignorant. You could have been a worse person in the past, and now you're better. I get that. But to say that didn't age well, to excuse it, I don't think that's okay, because you do things. It did hurt someone back then. Just at that moment in time, the culture, the mindset of the culture didn't care about the people it was hurting. Here's a good example of something that actually didn't age well. You know the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies? Mm-hmm. There was a trailer where these guys
9/11 thing?
Yeah, exactly. They hijacked a helicopter, and then Spider-Man ties them in between the Twin Towers. after 9/11 happened, they were like, we need to cut this out of the movie. And
That
I get
didn't
that.
age well.
That didn't age well. But also, there's no way you could have known. No way at all. But then when it's something where you do, where, yeah, but when it's something where you are
That's so unfortunate. How much money did they spend on that ad? That's terrible. It's
Lilo
terrible.
and Stitch had to do the same thing. They were actually going to have the scene where, have you seen Lilo and Stitch?
Yeah, bro, of course.
Like
How
the
the
final-
family.
The final spaceship scene, it was going to go through a city.
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're talking about.
And then they had to change it to a jungle because they were like, okay, no, we're not.
Oh my
not
god,
doing
I gotta
that.
tell you this. I gotta tell you this real quick, bro. There's this hilarious episode of Boondocks, right? Where Martin Luther King kind of like in the Boondocks universe, he didn't die. He just got shot and went into a coma for 30 years, and then he woke up again.
What?
And... Wait, have you seen Boondocks?
I've seen the first few episodes. It's really
It was
funny.
one of the first few episodes. It's amazing. It was like, and then it's absolutely incredible. It's like so good. And there's a great do the right thing at the episode as well. But there's this great episode. Martin Luther King comes, so he comes out of his coma or whatever, and he's like a hero or whatever. And then eventually nobody likes him because of what he's saying, you know. But they make a movie about Martin Luther King's life, and then it comes out, but it comes out on September 12th, 2001. So it's like,
Oh, that did. Oh man. No, but yeah, exactly. Like those are things that don't age well, but that's because like something else happened. There's new context. Not that you didn't care who you hurt. Like when someone does blackface and then it's like, hey, it was a different time, that didn't age well. No. It's not that it was a different time. It's that it was hurting someone, but that person, you didn't care. You maybe didn't know it was happening. Okay, I can understand that. Maybe you're ignorant to that. But if it was hurting someone, you didn't care on that information. You didn't ask before. And so you hurt someone. And it's not that it didn't age well. It's that you did something bad.
You should be held responsible for that kind of thing.
Yeah, very much. And I think it's very important that we have that conversation and figure out what actually is, oh, that didn't age well, and what actually was, you did something bad and you should be sorry and apologize.
Gone with the wind,
You should try to be better. Exactly.
All right, look, that was kind of our what was on my list. On Toby's and ours list that we had. What anything else you want to discuss, man? Anything you that's on your mind before we call it a day? I leave the floor to you, man. If you've got something, both of you. I mean, Ochieng, like.
Dude. I don't know,
no
bro.
pressure.
Let's
Like,
make
look,
this
it's
a
fine.
PSA. Let's make this a PSA saying, don't watch The Help or Green Book. Watch I Am Not Your Negro and Beale Street. That's what you should do. PSA. Watch I Am Not Your Negro and Beale Street before watching anything else.
Okay.
Important.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love me some Barry Jenkins, so you got it.
Yeah, there you go. Changing minds.
Have you seen Medicine for Melancholy?
Let me restate my previous statement. I love me some Moonlight, and Barry Jenkins directed that.
You should watch. Actually, my Joseph. You know what's interesting?
I'm a
Is
bad
that-
film student.
What's interesting is like I can't really like I don't see Moonlight inside of what do you call it? Inside of Medicine for Melancholy, but I see Moonlight in My Josephine.
That's so true. Well, I mean, I think you're talking about the rhythm and the lyricism, because I think My Josephine.
Even the color, man.
Well, yeah,
blue-green film.
Yeah, the turquoise blue.
Yeah,
green,
the rhythm.
Yeah.
The kind of looseness of it, the elliptical nature of it.
That's true.
You know.
There wasn't any scenes in a laundromat in Moonlight, though, was there? I don't think so, but it's okay.
There was. They were just off camera.
I agree.
It
Barry
was,
Jenkins did his laundry.
it felt like Medicine for Melancholy felt like Barry Jenkins had been watching a lot of mumblecore type stuff.
Well, for me, it felt like his Slacker. Like it felt like how to bust.
Yeah.
And it was like that classic low budget micro feature to put himself out there. It still retained some of like what he explored in terms of like the conversations his films would, I guess, ignite. But it isn't the same. Like you don't put it in that same category for sure.
It's more that his characters are having the conversations that his films will have. The characters in Medicine talk about the things that his other films will talk about. If you get what I mean.
I get what you mean. I still think he does that even in his films, though. Like, there's, like, in Beale Street, that whole thing of it's really hard to be black in this country. Like, he still has those, but I think he likes it. I think he likes to just have two characters just shooting the shit on camera. You know, I think there's, because he pulls it off so gracefully. Like, have you noticed how he does that weird pan thing? Like, he pans from one guy to the other guy, or you know, and then back and forth.
It's an interesting trademark of him.
Yeah.
He talks about it as passing energy between characters, between actors.
Another guy who does that is M. Night Shyamalan. I don't know if you noticed, but he does that a lot too. Like his early like Signs in the Village and Unbreakable are loaded with those little slow pans and stuff. I'm not trying to imply Barry Jenkins was influenced by M. Night Shyamalan, but it was.
Well,
it's his whole aesthetic.
So listen, that was a whole lot of subjects we covered there, and what can I say? I could talk about this all day, but Ochieng, man, I want to thank you for being on our show and for, you know, just for contributing so much great stuff. I mean, I gained a lot from hearing what you said, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So thanks for coming on board, man.
No, man. Thanks for inviting me. It was great kicking the shit with you guys.
Absolutely, man.
It was a good time.
All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Feel free to comment for anything you want us to talk about or cover, or you know, if you want us to discuss one particular topic or film, just fire away. We always say we're desperate for viewership. We're not kidding, you know. So help us.
We got a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page where Fareed's always posting really good stuff. We have a Facebook account. Please check that out if you're interested. We sometimes put behind the scenes stuff on there. I don't know, maybe a poll. Maybe we'll just ask you your name. We like to know names.
All right, guys. Well, on that note, really appreciate you tuning in, and catch you later.
Love you. Bye.